Okay, we are ready to begin. So let's begin today, Parashat Vayechi. I want to take a look at the berachot Yaakov gives to his sons, not so much because I want to discuss the berachot, but rather I want to show you how these berachot serve as a kind of closure on the whole of Yaakov's life and everything that's been happening since he got back to Eretz Yisrael from the beginning of Parashat Vayishlach onwards, how this parasha represents a closure, and then to see how this idea of what Yaakov is doing plays out within different stories of Tanakh. We'll see 4 different examples of stories in which this story is going to play out very differently. So we'll begin like this. We'll look at the berachot. Vayikra Yaakov el banav. He calls his sons together. Hasvu v'agid lachem et asher yikra etchem b'harit hayamim. Mahloket how to interpret this pasuk, but let's interpret it in a simple way. I'm going to tell you what your roles are going to be in life, right? I'm going to tell you what will happen to you, not so much what will happen to you, but rather who you're going to be, more what you're going to become. So first, we start off with Reuven. So Reuven, okay, Reuven, Bechoriyata, you're my firstborn. Let me tell you something. Pahaz kamayim al totar. You're too quick, and therefore, al totar, you're not going to get a double portion. That's how we traditionally read it. It's based off Divrei Hayamim as well. In Divrei Hayamim, it says specifically that Reuven loses his firstborn. Hi alita mishkevei avicha, and we discussed exactly what that might mean. We discussed it in a different class. You went upon your father's bed, whatever that may mean. But for our purposes, you did something wrong. Let's put it that way. You did something wrong, and since you did something wrong, therefore, al tuatad, you are no longer going to be have the rights of the firstborn. Okay, he's stripped from the firstborn rights.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, but doesn't, like, most children do things that are, quote, not right? Like, why did he have to lose that? I mean, I'm sure the other kids didn't do stuff that was so great. Like, that's a big thing to give up the firstbornship.
Okay, excellent question, right? And the answer seems to be, Yaakov actually seems to be giving an answer based on the words that he's telling Reuven. If we really look at it, he says, Pahaz kamayim al totar. You have a character trait of being quick like water, and therefore you cannot get your firstborn. You're too impulsive. That's what it seems to be saying. So speaking about his character trait, and therefore he's going to lose the firstborn. He seems to be connecting. It's not just the random idea that he committed an action, but rather it seems to be specifically connected in a way to exactly what he did and how that's reflective of his character. Does that make sense, Bobby?
Yes and no. I'm not so satisfied with that answer, but
okay, fine. Fine. Understood. Hold your question. Maybe we could address it in a different way. Let's see what happens with Shimon and Levi for a second, and then we'll come back to it in a different way. Okay? I'll try, because I think there might be more at play than what I just said. Okay, so he goes to Shimon and Levi. So Perek Memte. Yeah. So he goes to Shimon and Levi. They're up next, right? So notice he's going in age order, at least for now, he's going in age order, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and then we're going to get to Yehuda. Okay. And he tells them, Shimon v'Levi achim, so he's addressing them together. The fact that they're being dressed together is probably bad news for them, the fact that they're being addressed together, because if you're addressing them together, you're clearly going to refer to the action that they did together of destroying Sidon, destroying Shechem. And he goes, which is definitely not what any Jewish person wants to be told by their father. Their swords are weapons of violence. Right? That's not exactly what the sense you want to get from people who are, religious Jewish people. Okay, the swords are weapons of violence. So meaning this is clearly a negative connotation here. And therefore, I want to have nothing to do with these people. I don't want to be associated with them. And then he says in Pasuk Zayin, Arur apan ki az ibratam ki kashata, let the anger be cursed. And therefore, finally, we come to the thing, what's the ramification of this? Ahalikim Yaakov, ba'afisim Israel. I'm going to disperse them. I'm going to separate them amongst Am Yisrael. So again, Shimon, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, we can't call it a beracha in the traditional sense of the word, but to Yaakov's credit, he doesn't introduce it as a beracha. He says, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen to you at the end of the days. We see it over what your role is going to be in Am Yisrael in the future. Reuven, you're not going to be the Bechor. Shimon and Levi, you guys, bad news. I'm going to separate you two. Finally, we get to Yehuda.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah.
The Ve'afitzem Israel. I know it's supposed to be a negative, and I know Shimon sort of disappears, but like Levi, I'm kind of thinking, like, they're scattered throughout Israel, but in a positive.
Of course.
So it's interesting.
He leaves it open-ended, right? And that's the point that Shimon, they become really nothing, and Levim become the Levim, and they're spread out through the 48 cities of Am Yisrael. Correct, 100%. He's not. Listen, he has to keep it open to the fact that he doesn't want to eternally damn them for all time. But definitely, within this context, we'll come back to it. It's clearly a form of punishment, and I'll explain to you what I mean by that.
They can't be an entity unto themselves because, meaning Levi needed to be.
They needed to be spread out. Okay, so now we're talking about it the good way, right? Okay, fine. So we're talking about it in a good way, but look at the context. Look what he's really trying to. You don't understand what he's really trying to tell them until you get to Yehuda. What does he tell Yehuda? Where does that phrase come up significantly? Yishtahavu lecha b'nei avicha, or really perhaps the opposite way, Yishtahavu lecha b'nei imecha. It's very significant and a blessing given to somebody at some point in time, to the point where it excludes the other person from receiving a blessing. Yeah, right? Who can't get a blessing because the other person got the blessing. Yishtahavu lecha b'nei imecha. Esav. Yeah. So, what does he tell Yaakov accidentally? Perhaps. What does he tell Yaakov? You're going to be the one in charge. What does he tell Esav? I'm sorry, I already told him he's going to be in charge. You're going to have to be second to command. Okay, we'll come back to this idea. By the way, we'll come back to it. So Yehuda, when he's telling him this is the beracha that really everybody's waiting for. Who's going to be in charge? So notice what he does. He starts, I keep on saying alphabetical order. He starts biological order, age order. Reuven, you're out. Al Totad, you're out. Shimon Levi, it's not even a question, but why does he have to address them? Because they're in age order, they're up next. So what, does that mean Shimon is going to be the leader of Am Yisrael? No. Levi? No. Okay. Yehuda, you're going to be the one your brothers acknowledge. And then everybody else, they just kind of fall in line, right? I mean, notice all of a sudden it gets much shorter. Okay. So okay, you're going to be on the seashore. Very nice. Yisachar, you're going to rest in the land. Okay, very nice, right? Everybody's getting like these one pasuk berachot, obviously the exception being, coming up on the list, who's going to get a lot of words, Yosef. The exception being Yosef, and Yosef has something else going for him, right? What Yosef has going for him is the fact that he gets a double portion. Where's my beracha? Oh, here it is. Okay, Ben Purat Yosef, right? And he says, Yosef, you're going to get the double portion, or he told him earlier, Ephraim, Mashek, Reuven, Shimon, Yuli, and you're going to be fine. Okay, very good. And you should have a lot of extra berachot. Clearly, you can see the special love and affection he has to Yosef. Okay, and he saves him. It's interesting. He saves him for last. He purposely goes out of alphabetical biological order, and he saves Yosef for last, right? Okay, fine, very good. So now, the idea is like this: what is Yaakov really doing in these berachot, or what we call berachot? He's setting the record straight. He's referring to two events, or really three, which depends upon how you understand the beracha of Yehuda. He's referring to three events that he never resolved. the first story, the story of Reuven and Bilhah. The Torah tells us, Vayishma Yisrael, and he never resolves it. He's waiting till his deathbed, at least 40 years later, right? Because 22 years, Yosef is still with him. 22 years, Yosef disappears. He's 17 years in Egypt, so 39 years. So about 40 years later, in order to address the story, until he's ready to die. Never speaks to Reuven about it, right? According to the text of the Torah, V'shma Yisrael. Shimon v'Levi, the same thing, event that happened 40 years later. What does he do? What happens in the conversation? What do you do? We're going to get destroyed. They respond, Hachsuna ya'aseh ta'hoteru. We had to do something. And what does Yaakov respond? He holds his mouth for 40 years. So we see this tactic Yaakov is employing. Okay, I see how you're acting. I'm watching. I'm not really going to respond. I'm not really going to tell you the consequences of your actions, but I have things in my brain being planted. Where do we see it kind of come into play a little bit? When they want to take Binyamin down to Egypt. So who speaks first? Reuven speaks first. He's the Bechor. He speaks first. And what does Yaakov respond to him? No, you're not taking him. But he waits a little bit. Yehudah comes along. Yehudah speaks. Okay, fine. Yehudah, you could take him. So you already see Yaakov had these ideas in mind. Reuven, he's not the person I want to be the leader. You could even look at what Reuven says. You could kill my two sons if I don't bring him in front of you, right? Which is obviously that's bizarre. It's his grandchildren. Whereas Yehudah says, I'm taking personal responsibility. You get the idea this person is somebody who might be, somebody suited for leadership, whereas Reuven is just somebody who's too quick to make decisions. So, Bobby, what am I trying to tell you? It seems to be what Yaakov is doing is like this. They're not just one action that somebody did in one which way, and therefore it determines who's going to be the leader or not. It's Yaakov has been analyzing their behavior for years, right? We're talking about at least 40 years. He has these ideas in mind, and he's waiting for the right time to set the record straight who is going to be the leader of the family. Who's going to be the leader? And by the way, it's interesting. If you asked Yaakov 40 years ago who's going to be the leader, the answer probably would have been, Yosef. He gives him a keton pasim. Right? Yosef, what is he doing when he's giving him a keton pasim? He's saying, you're the leader of the family. You're the firstborn from the favored son. Okay, you're going to lead the family. You're going to be the person in charge. Yaakov, 40 years later, when he gives the berachot and he lays down the decisions. Thank you, Gul. He lays down the decisions. Who does he say is going to be in charge? He says Yehudah is going to be in charge. This is the dream that Yosef had about his brothers bowing down to him. The Torah tells us Aviv Shamar Tadavar, and Yaakov says no. Yaakov says no, that's not going to happen. Yehudah instead, which is a fascinating idea. Waits till the end of his life to make these decisions, to respond to what happens to them. And by the way, it seems to be it's not only Yaakov who says it's not going to be Yosef. Who else agrees it's not going to be Yosef? Yosef himself. How does he interpret the dream of his brothers bowing down to him? Or let me rephrase it: the stalks of wheat bowing down to his stalk of wheat. How does he interpret the dream? You're here only to be sustained by me, but I'm not leading you. I'm not leading you. Yosef, by the way, is part of Yosef's arc of Teshuvah. It's very interesting. Yosef changes his own arc. Yaakov agrees. Yosef arc it changes. Yehudah has to be the leader, and this is what Yaakov is setting up the structure. He's setting up of Am Yisrael on his deathbed. Okay, who else tries to do this towards the end of his life? He tries to create a structure of who's going to lead. Sefer Bereshit. Yitzhak. Yeah, right. Yitzhak tries to do the same thing exactly, except Yitzhak tries to choose Esav, and Rivka disagrees. Okay, fine. Let's put it this way: based on our classes, God agrees with Rivka, and God enables Yaakov to get the beracha of Yishtahavu Lecha B'nei Mecha. It's the exact same beracha that we're talking about. Yitzhak tries to set the record straight, doesn't work. And does Esav want to play second fiddle to Yaakov? No. So what does he do? What does Esav do? It's very interesting. What does Esav do? He screams, he cries, he gets a beracha, but ultimately, what does he do? He tries to kill Yaakov. Okay, he doesn't kill Yaakov. Ultimately, at the end of the day, what does Esav do?
He leaves.
He leaves. He leaves, right? No, he leaves. He leaves just like who left? Who did the same thing, didn't want to play second fiddle. He had too much cattle, and he had to leave. Lot, right? The language, if you parallel the language by Lot and Esav, you'll see it's the same exact thing. They had too much cattle, and they couldn't leave together, so he had to leave. Why? What does that mean? The same way Lot didn't want to play second fiddle to Esav, so a second fiddle to Avraham, he wanted to be independent. So too, Esav doesn't want to play second fiddle to Yaakov, so he leaves.
But by the way, there's a little tangent, but the entire story of Yitzhak and Esav and the Beracha situation is framed by, on one end, with Esav's wives, and on the other end with Esav's wife. He was leaving.
Okay, I'm talking about from Yitzhak's perspective, okay. Right? I'll make it easy on myself, right? Obviously, there's a lot to talk about from an easy perspective. Yishtahavu lecha b'nei mecha. That's the beracha he wants to give, to the point where he tells Esav, I can't give you anything else. This is the same beracha Yaakov is giving at the end of days. Perek 49 in Sefer Bereshit. I don't know what page. So page 106. So he's doing the same thing, meaning in that aspect, and except it goes awry, it doesn't go as he planned, fine. And then Esav, the key here is Esav refuses to accept being second fiddle. Who else does this story happen to? In the same way. Same way, he has to choose a successor towards the end of his life, and God intervenes, his wife, right? Ishmael, same story. What happens? Sarah sees him being misahek. Whatever the connotation of misahek being, it's clear that Ishmael is not accepting of the ranking that he, the older child, is going to be subservient to Yitzhak. Right? That much is clear from the story. Yitzhak Ishmael refusing to submit to Yitzhak. That laughter connotes some sense of I'm in charge. So what does Sarah do? We have to kick him out. He has to know his place. Does Ishmael learn his place? There's always an interesting story. When Ishmael gets kicked out, does he learn his place?
No.
Yeah, he does. How do I know he learns his place? Because he's around. He's around. Yitzhak, right? Hashem does a miracle for him. When Yitzhak is marrying Rivka, he's around that same well. So this is something interesting. There's a connection. Yitzhak and Ishmael, to the same place where there's a miracle to Ishmael, Yitzhak is around. He remains in contact with Ishmael. We know this because when Esav, when he can't marry from the daughters of the land, he goes marry Ishmael's daughter. So wait. You're telling me Ishmael is around as part of the family of Avraham. When Avraham dies, Yitzhak v'Ishmael banav, and the Torah says perfectly, Yitzhak v'Ishmael. Ishmael being second. Now you say, no, maybe it's just because the Torah likes Yitzhak better. When Yitzhak dies, it says, Yaakov banav. I think we can all agree that Torah doesn't like Esav better than Yaakov, and therefore you get this idea, Esav refuses to accept his place, Ishmael accepting his place, and therefore the rabbis call Ishmael a Sadiq. He dies a Sadiq, and therefore we use the name Ishmael in Judaism. I mean, I don't recommend necessarily using it today, but we have in the Mishnah to be Ishmael, right? Is a name that you could use because it's the name of a righteous person. We have yet to encounter the Esav, right? That you're not going to find that, right? Even though it might be used today, but that's a separate story. Okay. Nimrod, Esav, all these wonderful names. Okay. So you get the idea of what's happening, right? This is what Yaakov is doing is the same thing that Abraham did, the same thing that Yitzhak did, except he's literally doing it on his deathbed. but he's utilizing stories that happened 40 years in the past in order to rearrange the hierarchy. He even does some sense of teshuvah, where before he thought it was Yosef, and now he retracts. He gives the leadership to Yehuda. Ishtahavu lecha b'nei avicha. He has to say b'nei avicha. He can't say b'nei mecha because there's 4 different wives. Okay, fine. Ishtahavu lecha b'nei avicha. This is what Yaakov is doing on his deathbed, reorganizing and reshaping who is going to be the leader of Am Yisrael.
What does that look like?
I don't know, because he's not speaking at that time. He's speaking about Yehuda. He's talking about a time period when Zivulun lehof oniyot. He's on the seashore. Dan Yadin Amo Ke'achad Shiftei Yisrael, Gad Gedu Digudenu Hu Yagud Akeh. He's talking about different times in which they're not Halakeh Yaakov Afiseh Yisrael. Does it apply now? It's actually interesting, if you want to further it, who becomes the leader of Am Yisrael throughout their stay in Egypt? The Leviim, right? Especially according to the Rambam, Shevet Levi Ma'olam Lo Abdu Avodah Zarah. They weren't part of the Shi'abud. They weren't actually slaves. And then later on, when Aharon is clearly involved, Miriam is a Nevi'ah, obviously Moshe, their family of leadership coming from the Leviim. It seems to be the Leviim are charged. Yehuda, what happens to him? I don't know. Nothing much. Oh, okay, I'll tell you what happens to Yehuda. They get to march. They get to march at the head of Digel Mahane Yehuda. Okay, Hazak Baruch. What does that do for anybody? And they get to go first. Does that mean anything? I don't really know. Right, but Yehuda seems to be the leadership of Yehuda is absent. We want to talk about the midrash of Nahshon ben Aminadav jumps into the sea. Okay, maybe they start taking an active role of leadership. They're the first tribe to bring a korban, but it seems to be we have to manufacture the opportunities for them to lead, as opposed to this being a natural sense of leadership. Now, Am Yisrael is in a strange place in which you have the Navi, the Levi, and the Melech all in one person, right? Moshe Rabbeinu. It's not meant to be. Okay, and the Kohen, his brother, right? This is not what's meant to be going forward in the future. With division of labor. And that's not what Yaakov is talking about. He's talking about the tribe of Yehuda. We don't really see it come into play until afterwards. If you want, Hazal talk about that Yehuda is the one who's gets the place of honor, carrying Yaakov's coffin. Okay, I don't know. More than that, it doesn't really mean anything, but that's why he's speaking prophetically into the future.
He's speaking prophetically, and they, for the most part, a lot of this forgot while they were in Egypt, in Mesorah. And again, I know things were unearthed when Moshe came, and Takadji, and all that, and the Leviim were sort of housing all this.
Right.
Correct?
Correct.
So, interesting.
No, but I would say like this. Keep in mind, you're talking about a nation, right? And leadership within the nation. They're an oppressed people. They're not a nation.
Right.
You want to throw in that they're assimilating and they're really not trying to have an identity of Israel, and that's why there's no role for Yehuda. Okay, fine, no problem. We can throw that in as well. Right, but I'm saying, right. They have to be their own independent nation in order for Yehuda to be the leader.
Right.
As long as they're not independent, there's no leadership. They're being led by Paro. Especially if you want to say they're assimilating and all of that. Okay, fine. Yeah, so that's why in the future, once we have Am Yisrael. Now, what's fascinating about this? What's interesting? Yaakov is the only one who actually gets all his children to go along with the plan. Abraham didn't seem to be too bad. Ishmael is like semi-part of, quasi, exactly, not so clear what he's doing there. He dies as Sadiq, but where are his children? They marry Esav instead of Yitzhak. So what does that mean? I don't know. Really, I just don't know what happens to Ishmael. But if we're following that thread, they just kind of seem to disappear. You want to talk about them being monotheistic. It's not true until 632, right? 1,400 years ago, for 2,000 years, they're worshiping Avodah Zarah. So we can't really talk about Ishmael creating a movement here. And what's his name? Muhammad, anyway, related to Ishmael? The odds are probably not. There's a lot of, okay, fine. I don't know. I don't know what happens to them. Really, I don't know where they go. Okay, whatever happens to them happens. Interesting. But Yitzhak clearly doesn't succeed because Esav refuses to accept, and therefore Yaakov somehow manages to succeed. So what did Yaakov do right that they did wrong. Is the question. Or did he do anything right that they did wrong? So I wanna jump to something. I want to jump to a story about David HaMelech. Right? The next time you have a real transition of power between people is David HaMelech, right? He's the next one who actually, he needs to transition power between his different sons. And if you want to know the problem with David HaMelech, you'll see very quickly what the problem is. That we have David HaMelech, why is it? Oh, it's Shemuel Bet. If you look at Shemuel Bet, Perek Gimel, you don't even need if you want to turn, you could turn, right? Shemuel Bet, Perek Gimel, it says a couple of Pesukim. I just want to show you his lineage, okay? His first 6 children. So David, he's right now within this text, he is not yet a king. Pretty sure it's, actually made sure to find it. In Shemuel Perek, at the end of, the beginning of Perek Gimel. Okay, that's why. Shemuel, the beginning of Perek Gimel, you'll see that, 648, okay, fine. You'll see it lists his kids from Pasuk Bet. Vayivaldu David bani behevron. Who is his firstborn? Vahi bechoro Amnon la'achinoam ha'Yisraelit. We'll talk about him in a second. Umishnehu kil'av la'Abigail eshet naval karmeli. והשלישי אבשלום בן מעכה בת תלמי מלך גשור, והרביעי אדוניה בן חגית, והחמישי שפטיה, והשישי דרעם. Okay, so we have 6 children David has. We're familiar with 3 out of the first 4. What happens to David's firstborn Amnon? What happens to him? Why is he not in line to be the king? He died. He got murdered.
From his brother.
He got murdered from his brother Avshalom. Correct. Why did he get murdered from his brother Avshalom? Because he sleeps with Avshalom, so he rapes Avshalom's sister Tamar, and therefore Avshalom kills him in revenge. So he's out of the picture. Why is he raping her? Just think about it for a second. Who is he? Who is Amnon? What title would we give Amnon when he's still alive? He's the crown prince, right? He's the crown prince. So what does he do? That does whatever he wants. I mean, that's what he does, right? If you actually look at the story, he's speaking to the advisor of David. He's the crown prince. He's speaking. He's using the king's advisors. He's going to be the next guy in charge. And already they're kind of cushioning up to him, cozying up to him, telling him what to do, how to be able to successfully rape his sister. And yeah, okay, that's what happens. This is a story, right? And you can see the abuse of power. Okay, he gets killed. All right, out of the picture. This guy, Kil'av, number 2, we never find again. In Divrei Yamim, he's called Daniel. He's not even called Kil'av. He kind of disappears from the picture. Hazal love him so much, they paint him as a Talmid Chacham, meaning, why is he not involved in the political machinations? Because he's a good religious fellow, so therefore he's out of the picture, right? That really is something interesting, and therefore he has 2 names. One is his actual name, one is his name that represents his stature of a Talmid Chacham. Daniel is his real name. Kil'av represents his stature. It should come as no surprise. He's born to Abigail. We like Abigail. She's one of the 7 people. When we say the child should be like, she'd be like Abigail. Okay, fine. So he's out of the picture. The third guy, Avshalom, we know what he does. Not only does he kill number 1, but Avshalom also actually, in David's lifetime, he has a rebellion against his father while his father is still alive. Not that he fights over succession of his father. He literally takes over his father in his lifetime, and he probably almost would have succeeded if not for God interfering. Okay. Then we have the 4th guy. We have Adoniyahu. What happens to Adoniyahu? When David is old, Avshalom is dead, David is old, right? 1 is out of the picture because he's dead. 3 is out of the picture because he's dead. 2, we said, is too from to be involved, right? I'll put it that way. So he says, and he actually coronates himself at the end of his father's lifetime. Right? So you see what happens here. We get the picture, it's a wonderful story. And then what happens, Bathsheba and Natan Hanavi have to go and to see Ms. David, who's 70 years old and on his deathbed. And they have a whole political maneuvering. They say, what about Shlomo? Okay, Shlomo, okay, Shlomo becomes the king. What about Adoniyahu? Then Shlomo has to eventually ends up killing him. Because he's still trying, even after David dies and Shlomo is king, he's still trying to play the game. Shlomo realizes what's happening and he ends up killing him. Fine. So you can tell that the transition of power, the point we're trying to make here, when you look at David's life, is that the transition of power is not a simple thing.
He was also given punishment.
Yes and no. What do I mean, yes and no? Agreed. But at the end of the day, right, these people are willing participants. So you're right. Avshalom's rebellion didn't need to succeed the way it did. Maybe Amnon didn't need it. At the end of the day, Avshalom decided to rebel. Adoniyahu decided to do what he did. Amnon decided to rape his sister. At the end of the day, right?
One way or another, right?
No.
Whether it was
So,
divine punishment or not.
right.
Its character.
Oh, okay. Well, let's put it this way. Forget about David for a second. I think it speaks more about vying for power. It's a messy thing, right? That's really what's happening. It's a messy thing when there's a position of leadership and then there's a vacuum. What happens is people are going to fight about it. People are going to kill. But it's lucky. Esau doesn't kill Yaakov. I mean, that's what you're talking about, right? Ishmael and Yitzhak, God and Sarah had to intervene. Esav, okay, he liked Yitzhak, so he didn't kill Yaakov, and then we had that whole story with the Malach and the 400 men. Okay, so lucky divine intervention. David doesn't have divine intervention, so therefore 3 out of 4 of them end up dead.
But also David is immediate and practical. Yaakov wasn't immediate.
I mean, it wasn't immediate, but they sold Yosef. They sold Yosef because of it. He's 17 and they sold him. I mean, what are we talking about? They thought it was immediate. Yaakov switches it and says, this might not be immediate, but this is what they're fighting over. And think about this. Why Shimon and Levi are going to attack Shechem? Why is Reuven sleeping or whatever with Bilhah? What are these all about? They're all about power plays asserting themselves 100%, right? 100%. Shimon and Levi jumped the gun. People try to explain Reuven's act in some way asserting himself after what he views Yaakov's failure of dealing with Dinah, right? Each person is trying to assert themselves, and they get up and they get knocked down. And then Yehuda asserts himself, by the way. How does Yehuda assert himself? What's Yehuda's first responsibility? Selling Yosef. Okay, Yehuda goes through a redemptive arc through Tamar, the story of Tamar, and then protecting Binyamin. So he has to do his teshuvah. He has a redemptive arc there. But this is what happens, meaning my point being, this is what happens naturally. Once there's a position of power at play, what is going to happen? People are going to fight about it. This is what happens. So it's actually interesting. It's actually interesting by Adoniyahu. It says, "Lo atzavo aviv miyabav." His father never rebuked him. By Avshalom, it says something similar, that David doesn't get involved. So it seems to be David doesn't get involved with the story of Amnon and Tamar, and therefore Avshalom takes matters into his own hands. It's a good question. What happens to David? Where's David's role in watching his own house? We could point to either divine, right, is going to happen anyway. But we could point to, if you want to put it in a positive way, he's busy dealing with other things. He doesn't have time to pay attention to his house, which is probably, unfortunately, but for a king, yeah, that's probably pretty much true. And keep in mind what David is doing. We know what David is doing because this is the way Avshalom rebels. David, when we talk about him being king, he's dealing with mishpat ustaka l'chol amo, meaning when you have 2 prostitutes coming in front of Shlomo, talking about whose baby it is, and it's coming to Shlomo, the king of Israel. Where did Shlomo get that from? Because that's what David did. This is what he's dealing with. He's dealing with the problems of a nation. Remember, in the Avshalom story, there's a random woman Yoav pays to go in front of David. And she lies, and she's talking about a story of justice for her child. This is what David's dealing with. So where is he with his family? He's not there. I mean, and I don't think, not in the negative sense, that he doesn't have the luxury of being involved in his immediate family squabbles and whatever. He's just not there, unfortunately. But if you want to take it, obviously, in a more negative way, and you want to say David is the absent father, okay, you could say that too. But I just think the story just reads, the man literally is devoted to Am Yisrael. He doesn't have a choice. When you want from the person that he can't sit there regulating these squabbles, and then obviously until they develop into something much bigger, and fine. Keep in mind also he has a lot of kids. These are the 6 he has in Hebron. Then he has children in Yerushalayim. There's a lot going on there. There's a big house. Right, there's not one mother, right? All these things lead into causing these problems and very complicated problems. So, got you. What are you gonna do? Beyond his ability, clearly to either beyond his ability, that's gonna do it. I don't know, whatever. This wasn't there. But our point is, I think, far more interesting. You look at the parallels between the story, you understand that this is nothing simple by any means. Who is going to be the next leader of the people? There's really only one time in Am Yisrael you have a successful transfer of power, only because it's very easy to do. And who's the only people who successfully transfer power in a normal way? Moshe and Yehoshua.
Oh.
Right? No. Right? Keep in mind the father son. What's the problem? When there's multiple sons and it's unclear who is supposed to be the leader, either because Amnon is dead, the Bechor is dead, or because Reuven is basically not suitable for leadership. Right? So this is what. There's another Bechor. Yosef is also a Bechor. Whatever it may be, when it's unclear, you have fights. The Am Yisrael, you don't have a greater think who's going to be the next guy. And keep in mind, the rabbis developed within the Midrash that who does Moshe want to be the next guy? Who does Moshe want? His son. His son. Right? Moshe wants his son, and Hashem has to tell him no. What? Yeah, but yeah, I said, Hazal. Yeah, but no, it's just that. It's a Midrash that does it. I don't know if it really happened or not, but this is human nature, all right? So what happens here? Moshe, you're lucky he's Moshe Rabbeinu, and you're lucky he listens to God, and you're lucky he had the authority of the people, and they literally create a public staging in which he's conferring his hands upon Yehoshua, and all of a sudden the whole nation sees, and that's why when you read Yehoshua Perek Aleph, you can see how delicate the transfer of power was. Yehoshua is nervous about asserting himself. They say, Yehoshua, don't worry, we're going to listen to whatever you say. Well, Chazal asked 3 times. Hashem has to tell him. The people have to tell him. They'll say, we'll kill anybody who doesn't listen to you. B'nai Gad and B'nai Reuven say we're ready to go. Like it wasn't obvious, right? So you can tell these things don't happen naturally. The transfer of power is a very delicate thing. And the one who succeeds more than anybody, fascinatingly enough, is Yaakov Avinu. At the end of the day, sometimes we don't focus on this, right? We focus on all the failures of what happens. At the end of the day, he has 12 children. Are they all together at the end of the day? Do they all have an acknowledged leader at the end of the day? Yes.
But that's because they were always, there was some camaraderie to begin with.
Nobody talking about camaraderie. They hated each other. They sold Yosef. But
they did it together.
Okay, they did together, but you can see, not really. Reuven has a different program. Yehuda has a different program. Shimon and Levi on a different. Shimon and Levi really want to kill him. Reuven wants to return him to his father. Yehuda sells him as a slave. I don't know. They're not on the same program.
Circumstance. I'm not taking it away from you.
Yeah.
Living like you said, in another land. They're not sovereign people. Yosef is still alive. They still have their worries about Yosef.
Ask yourself the question: how are they all still together, even without Yosef? The fact that they're all still together in their father's household. What? No. How do I know it's not true? Because I have a story of Yehuda not being part of his father's household for years. Where's Yehuda for years? But where did Yehuda have? He's in a place called Adulam. I don't even know where it is. Right? In Timnah. Where are we talking about? Timnata Lagosono. He's in a different ballgame. He has nothing to do with his brothers. He has some random guy named Hira as his buddy. He left the father's house. Reuven, how come he never left? Shimon and Levi, how come they never left? Yehuda, how come he came back? This is not easy. This is what all of a sudden you realize Yaakov somehow skillfully maneuvers, not just in Vayechi, a transfer succession of power, and nobody's killing each other when he says this, but he successfully managed to have all 12 children there at the end of his life. And by the way, now you could appreciate that beautiful midrash that when Yaakov gathers his sons at the end of his lives, what do they tell him? Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. We're one. God is one. We're one. It's not obvious that this is going to happen. It never happens, right? That's my point. If you look at Tanakh, it doesn't happen. Yaakov did something that nobody else managed to do. So you know what the rabbis say? The rabbis have an interesting answer. And I'll tell you the rabbis' answer. I don't know. Maybe there's a better answer. But meaning, if you walk away, other than having a newfound appreciation for Yaakov managed to do, and you realize that how many times throughout the Sefer, the ability, the fabric, or what do we call it? The fabric was straining, it was about to be ripped, and they were about to be separated. And somehow Yaakov manages to keep them all together in all these bizarre circumstances. And by the way, Hazal, the Midashim, this is all they talk about Yaakov, right? About his 12 children all being part of the same program, right? The Midrash talks about all the time.
Hold on.
It is Yosef. Yosef does a tremendous thing.
No,
But
I'm saying it's always Yosef. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not.
Sandy.
They around Yosef, they got together and they sold him. Around Binyamin, they got together and they,
Yeah, but look, okay, look what happens at the end of Parashat Vayechi. Yaakov is dead, and what did the brothers do? When you hear Yosef, you're a slave, so now we know you're going to take revenge against us now that our father's dead. Who are they accusing him of being, by the way, fascinatingly enough? You're going to take revenge now that our father's dead, meaning who was going to take revenge once his father died against his brother? Esav. So they tell him, you're Esav. And what does Yosef say? No, I'm not Esav. We're all in this together. And I accept Yehuda as the guy. Like, this is what happens. Even though I'm in the position of power from a political standpoint, I realize it doesn't mean anything. God sent me here to provide you food. That was the meaning of my dream. Yehuda is in charge, and we're all good to go. Now, all of a sudden, we realize we have to have a newfound appreciation for Yaakov's parenting skills, which I think at the end of the day, right? Well, Yaakov, what's he doing? What's he doing? How come he's not responding in Parashat Vayishlach, not to Reuven, not to Shimon and Levi? What's he doing after the story of Yosef? Yeah, you know what? It works out very well for the man. And you know what? He does respond. But what did the rabbis point out? He only responds when he's dying on his deathbed. The rabbis say this is what you have to do. What does that mean? It's a crazy idea. It's not like this. If he responds in his lifetime, you think Reuven is ever going to look at his father again? Yeah, you're not the firstborn anymore. Okay, fine. I can't. You can't look at the guy. So what's he going to do? Reuven won't be able to look at his father out of shame. So what's he going to do? What's he going to do? He's going to leave. But Reuven didn't leave because Yaakov didn't force him to leave by not confronting him. He's going to confront him on his deathbed. But it's okay, he's dying. There's dying. You're allowed, right? Now, is Yitzhak dying when he gives the bracha to? He thinks he's dying. But you're not dying, Yitzhak, right? According to Hazal, he's not dying for 60 years. But definitely according to the text, he's not dying anytime soon. Yaakov goes 22 years to the house of Lavan and comes back, and he's still alive and well. And if you figure out the years, and the rabbis say he's dying after Yosef gets sold. Right, so he's there for a while. He's there for a good 20 years before, right? So you're talking about more than 40 years. Definitely from the pshat of the text that Yitzhak is still alive. What's the problem? What did he do? He did it during his lifetime. It's not his deathbed with his. He's conveying authority to one over the other. Yeah, they're going to hate each other, and right? Because as long as the father's still alive, we can still fight about it. David, all the fights are happening while the father's still alive. The father, we could fight about it. What does Yaakov do? Relax. He made his mistake. He gave the Ketona Pasim to Yosef in his lifetime, and it turned out to be a disaster. But he said, okay, I'm going to shut up from there. And on my deathbed, then I'll deal with the situation. And this is fast. It's the father's dying wishes. Okay, he said the guy, this is what he said. Everybody heard, all of you around. He confronted to him, right? He told you, why not Noved? Why not Shimon Levi? Okay, so here, fine. They accept the father's wishes at the end of his life. He's telling them, I understand you're still my sons, but this guy has to be the one. Okay, that you could accept that when the guy's on his deathbed. That's what the rabbis are saying. I don't know. It's a fascinating idea. I go back and forth with this idea. Does it make sense? But what you could see is everybody else fails. I don't know what else to say. Moshe, when he appoints Yehoshua, it's only after God tells him, you're going to die. It's year 40. You're going to die. And Moshe says, and not only after you're going to die, Hashem says, go up to the mountain and take revenge against Midian, and then you're going to die right now. And Moshe says, okay. You understand what's happening here. You can't do it during your lifetime. Wait until the end. Appoint it. Last wishes. Everybody respects it. That's what seems to be This is what Hazal are trying to point out. And if you look at Tanakh positions, battling for leadership is a disaster. So don't appoint leaders. Don't start rebuking them. Don't give them consequences until you're ready to pass on. Why? Because it's too risky. That's what it seems to be. That's the story. He did. He's sitting there. No, but then at the end of his life, he's sitting there. He's half dying. So they find Avishag Shulamit. What does he not do? At this point in time, okay, David, you don't die. Appoint Shlomo. He fails to appoint Shlomo. So what happens? Now at his deathbed, he doesn't do it. So then Adoniyahu comes into play and tries to rebel. So David's fault for not doing it when he was supposed to do it, right? Okay, earlier, fine, he didn't need to do it. But you know you're dying, so now do it. Which is interesting, spin on the events of where David went wrong in that case, right? But point is, I think the whole story of Parashat Vayechi is so counterintuitive to everything we expect to happen from based off Sefer Bereshit and based off Yaakov's lifetime, that finally he manages to put everything in order. He's the only one who manages to do it in the whole book. Say what you want to say. And that's why he's the only one who manages to do it, to get all his sons to stick around, starting from Cain and Hevel killing each other, and until killing each other, whatever, Cain killing Hevel, and going from Yitzhak, Ishmael, and Yaakov, and Esav, and whatever, he finally gets it right. So you know what we do? What do? We end the book. Okay, now we got somebody figured out how to keep everybody together. Okay, book over. Bereshit is over.
But it's the biggest event in his life. Even event of him dealing with this transfer of power and the ramifications.
Who, yeah?
Meaning,
Yaakov.
It's like it was a transformative event.
Right, so you think maybe because of his own personal suffering, maybe he finally figured it out, but he didn't in Parashat Vayechi. That's what's fascinating. He doesn't. So why? Because their father's still alive. So if we get rid of the guy, he'll choose someone else. Right? No, he's dead. That's it. Choose someone. What's he gonna do? He's not gonna live another day. He's gonna die. You can't. That's how the rabbis interpret this whole series of events here of what's happening. But also, I think that's the beauty of the Parashat Vayechi. What's really happening? We call it berachot. It's not berachot. It's the firming of what we're gonna call Am Yisrael. Everybody agreeing to Yishahavu lecha b'nei avicha, something nobody was able to agree upon beforehand. And Yaakov is the only one who manages to get the word in, and the book ends. Not bad. I'm not saying Yosef doesn't help. I'm not saying, but yeah, each one finds their own way, and each one has their own redemption that they need to do, but only because Yaakov gave them the ability to find themselves, which is very interesting. I don't know what that means. It sounds scary sometimes, but right, the parent taking a step back specifically and not getting involved right away, while still ultimately giving consequences, is what enables Yaakov to succeed, which is probably something no parent wants to hear.
Also, yeah, they all did with skills and really preparing.
Yeah, but only because Yaakov took a step back and allowed there to be a natural development of leadership, right? Does any parent want to hear that the way you're going to allow your children to succeed is to step back, and if you're too over involved in their lives, you might actually lose them for what you want to do? No parent wants to hear that. Yaakov Avinu didn't want to hear that in Parashat Vayechi. And that's a lesson you have to learn, which is it's fascinating. And this is what Hazal are telling you from a parenting role in order to assure a continuity in having your children together. Now, obviously, the average parent doesn't have the same stakes that Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov is dealing with, or David is dealing with. Okay, big deal. I mean, most times, big deal. What's really going to happen, and there's room enough for all siblings and whatever. But the idea, I think, really remains true. Regardless, it's a very interesting, I think, outlook on how to view what's happening here and how to view the parasha. So we'll pause here and.